and welcome to Radio Waves. I'm your host, Kris Poliquin, and this is a production of Red Apples Media. We're broadcasting out of WLBE My 790 AM out of Leesburg, Florida. And if you're watching us on television, you're doing so on Xfinity, Channel 13, Spectrum 498, and CenturyLink Prism, Channel 83. Today, we're going to be making waves with Jeff Cole, Lake County's county manager. Jeff, thanks for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Chris. Good to be here.
Thank you. I know you have a very busy schedule, and I appreciate you coming on. So you've been the county manager since June, correct?
Correct, yes. I started in June, beginning of June, and really spent the summer getting integrated and assimilated into that role. And we spent a lot of time this summer focused on the county budget and looking for opportunities for maintaining current levels of service or increasing them, but at the same time looking for opportunities to reduce costs, reduce expenses, and then bring in a budget that reflected those streamlined efforts.
Okay, so how much were you able to save? Or is that even determinable?
No, it is. It is. It was very quantifiable, and we spent several months looking at are there better ways to do things, and this really is an ongoing process throughout any month, not just during the summer months when we were preparing to finalize the budget, which got finalized in September for a new fiscal year that began October 1. And so, as we looked at opportunities to identify funding that then we could move either towards reserves or that we could reduce the millage rate to accommodate, we came up with a little over $1 million in savings. And so by the time our exercise was completed in September, in August to September, we had reorganized the leadership team, and that in and of itself saved a little over $300,000, and we reduced some positions. And then as part of that, we came up with a total of $1.6 million in reserves that then we had planned to have a corresponding reduction in the millage rate. And by reducing the millage rate, then you would reduce that amount going into reserves, but at the same time, you're providing some tax relief for the public. And so that was the plan, and that was as we were executing at the beginning of September, and then came Hurricane Irma. So we had a budget. I had committed to the commissioners that we would reduce that or offer them an opportunity to reduce the millage, and we were on the path to do that. Excuse me, and I'd even written a memo to the board offering those savings, offering those new numbers. And then Hurricane Irma came, and then we had the impacts from Irma. And then what we're looking at now is all the debris removal, which we can talk more about. But ultimately, the costs relating to in a storm like that, in an emergency storm like that, about 80 to 85% of your costs are related to debris removal. And so by the time we got to the first public hearing in September 19th, we were incurring a lot of those costs, and we have to upfront all the funding that then some of it's reimbursable by FEMA at a later date, and it can take a lot of years for that reimbursement to occur. But so ultimately, we have to front the funding, and that can be anywhere between $10 and $20 million for a storm like this. So
how much?
$10 to $20 million is how much we can have to upfront for a storm like this, mostly for the cleanup. And so all of that being said, that then impacted our ability to reduce the millage. So the board ended up keeping the millage at the steady rate. It didn't increase, kept at the steady rate, and we were able to use the $1.6 million to go towards the effects of the storm and the related costs from that.
Debris cleanup has been a hot topic. As you drive around, there's still piles on the side of the road, and I've seen a lot of people, neighbors, going, "Okay, what's the deal?"
And I've gotten a lot of those calls too, Chris.
I bet you have. I bet you have. I know my neighbors or some of them going, "Okay, it's been a month."
Yeah. Indeed.
And this road is still dangerous because you got, now that all the debris is starting to die, it's starting to sink, and sticks are starting to encroach roads and things of that nature.
Yeah, you are seeing some shifting of it, and so I can fill everybody in on that. And that has been a phenomenal, huge responsibility in getting all of the debris cleaned up, and we've made some good progress. We've got a long way to go, but just to put it into some perspective, we estimate that at the beginning, after the storm passed, we estimated about 350,000 cubic yards of debris, and that includes about 300,000 of vegetative debris and about 50,000 of construction type debris. So that's how much we estimate on the county roads and the roads that the county is responsible for clearing. And just to put that in perspective, what does 350,000 cubic yards look like? Well, if you put that in a professional football field, it would stack 175 feet high. So that's a pretty phenomenal amount of debris.
That's a lot.
Right. And so our responsibility is to ensure that we're protecting the taxpayers' dollars as much as possible. We have to clean up the debris per all the FEMA standards. So typically you find about 75% of your related costs from a storm cleanup like this are reimbursable by FEMA. But there are very, very restrictive approaches that you have to take. A lot of criteria that's in place, dictated by the federal government, that we have to follow in order to be eligible. So, if we sent our debris haulers out there and just cleaned up all the roads without any consideration for the criteria, then we'd have to be paying all of that. Taxpayers would be having to pay the $10 to $20 million that the cleanup would cost. And so that's then the parameters with which we work require us to hire a special contractor, which we did right after the storm. We already actually had on contract. And then we have to hire a second contractor that is called the monitor. And the monitor follows around all of the trucks that are out there cleaning up debris. And that's the process. It slows everything down a little bit because a monitor has to ensure that the debris that's being collected is indeed a legitimate reimbursable expense by FEMA. And
well, now, Jeff, what exactly does it mean, a legitimate?
Right. So the monitor manages the observation part and the record keeping, and they're looking at making sure that this is debris related to the storm. There's a difference between debris that happened from the storm and, say, when you go out and clean up your yard and you've got, say, a lot of green shrubs that you've cut back. And so there's a difference between what came from the storm and what otherwise would just be yard debris. So that is a bit of I know the listeners right now are thinking, what a bureaucratic process that is.
Sure, because, it's been so long now that the initial debris piles were a couple of days immediately following the storm. But you go a couple more weeks, people still have yard work to do.
Right.
Now, is that a burden on the citizens, or is it just a burden on the collectors themselves? Because
it's a burden.
How does that get monitored? How does FEMA know what's green and what's brown?
It's a burden on both. I would say it's a burden on all entities, because the public is having to deal with the debris that's still sitting out there. The public's having to deal with, if you didn't have your debris out at a certain point in time, then you can still get it out. And so let me just explain kind of how the process, now that we know the kind of the bureaucratic part of things. So we have the debris haulers that are out there, and we have to collect on all the county maintained roads, all the county roads, as well as in 4 cities. We have agreements with 4 cities, and then there also are some county roads that are in cities. So it's a hard thing for the public often to know, am I on a county road, a city road, whose responsibility is it? I can assure you we know whose responsibility it is. And the city governments know whose responsibility it is. And so the debris, the monitor that I explained that ensures that these are legitimate expenses, the monitor decides where first to go and then where to continue going, and kind of the process and the priorities. And the way they decide that is the hardest hit areas with the most population are first in line, and that was Umatilla. So Umatilla, which we have an agreement with to pick up all of Umatilla's storm-related debris, that was the first area that the contractor was in, and then have branched out since then. And so right now, at this moment, we're about halfway through the collection, and what we find is when you go through a neighborhood and you collect all that debris, the next day, the next week, 2 weeks later, there may be a whole lot more out there because the public hadn't had an opportunity to get into their yard yet. That happened in my house too, is it took me a couple of weeks before I actually was able to do the yard work. So people shouldn't feel like they're only getting one pass. We are going to make 2 or 3 passes through the entire county. We're trying to make a first pass through, and then once that first pass is through, we'll go back and start addressing second pass, and if a third pass is necessary. So people hopefully are seeing us more out there.
That's complicated.
It is complicated, and it is slowed down a bit by the process. But if we didn't pay attention to the process and the criteria, then we'd be all paying for the total cost of the storm. And I'd much rather see us get 75 to 80% reimbursement than having to have the taxpayers of Lake County pay for all that cleanup.
Oh, understandably. And as a taxpayer.
Yes.
Thank you.
Indeed.
I mean, really.
Indeed. But it's hard sometimes to understand that it's still sitting out in a lot of areas. And then they order, I've gotten many phone calls and letters saying, hey, can you come to, or not letters, but emails, can you come to my area and clean that up now? Well, that really, as I said, is up to the monitor to make the decisions on where they're going next. And, some of it was slowed down in the beginning because power lines were in the way. And so a lot of that's been addressed. We also are cleaning up the non-county maintained roads as well as the roads in private subdivisions. And again, I'm talking about county unincorporated areas with the exception of 4 cities in the cities of Umatilla, Claremont, Mineola, Howey, and the Hills. Those are the cities that we have agreements with right now to clean up those entire cities. So the county's doing that work also.
And Lake County is not a small county.
Lake County is not a small county.
It
When
is
you think of
not a
175 feet deep of debris on a professional football field, that's what we're dealing with. And not only is it going out there and collecting it in some cases with a claw truck, but if you and just like I have driven around and you can see that there are some mammoth trees out there that require a whole lot of space in trucks. And so it's a lot of trips. It's a lot of moving of the debris around. It's a lot of the collection. Sometimes they'll collect the smaller debris and have to come back with a different truck for the larger debris. So I've been following Facebook and the comments that are posted on Facebook, and they have actually been people who have generally been very supportive of understanding that this is a huge, huge task that we have undertaken, and it's the likes of which Lake County hasn't seen, at least in anybody that I've talked to that's lived here for most of their lives.
Right. Now, where's all this debris going?
So we have a number of sites. It's a good question. We have a number of sites in the county where we basically have the deposits of the debris, and then what will happen is we'll go into those areas and we'll mulch up the debris that's there, and then we'll transport that. So rather than having one central location, the landfill, to go to, we decided to make a number of locations so that the transportation time could be reduced as best as possible.
Wow, that's got to be a lot of mulch.
It will indeed be, but we're as I said, halfway through, so we're really pleased with the progress that we've made. But we know there's a whole lot more to be done, and even when we get to that 300,000 cubic yard point, roughly, I know there's going to be a whole lot more to collect because, as I said, people haven't had, not everybody had the opportunity within a week to go out and transport their debris to the curb. So that's taking time, and we understand that. And so nobody should feel like, hey, the trucks come by, I'm not going to see it again. We're also going to, once we feel like we're nearly complete, we're going to put a phone number out there that people can call and say, yeah, you're not quite complete. You'd have to come back to my neighborhood. And so we'll still be doing that. So it'll go on for a while.
Now, if someone does want to get more information on that, where can they go?
They can call our Office of Solid Waste at the county, and that number is 343-3776, 343-3776.
Okay. So I read somewhere that they might be giving out mulch as well. Or what are we doing with all the mulch? Are we setting a giant bonfire? Or
no giant bonfires that I'm aware of.
Good, because that's the last thing we need.
Our first priority is moving the debris and getting the debris relocated away from people's driveways and businesses' driveways. And so I'm not sure at this point what happens to all the mulch, but we're ultimately grinding all the debris up.
Okay. Now, if there are any areas, or are there any areas that's not covered by Lake County?
If you're in a city that is not one of the ones that I mentioned, not one of the 4, then your city is taking care of the debris collection. And they're doing it just like we are, in that they're working to abide by the FEMA regulations so that they can get reimbursed for their, I believe for the most part, is how they're handling it.
Jeff, we need to take a quick break. When we return, we'll get into a little bit more of what's happening in Lake County.
Excellent.
We'll be right back. Hello, and welcome back to Radio Waves. Again, I'm your host, Kris Poliquin, and this is a production of Red Apples Media. Before the break, we were talking with County Manager Jeff Cole on the debris pickup in Lake County after Hurricane Irma. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the Disaster Recovery Center and a little bit about our economic growth here in Lake County. Jeff, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Today you're opening up the disaster recovery with FEMA, correct?
Correct. FEMA, we've been working with FEMA since the storm, and they had indicated that they would be interested in using a county facility to open up what they refer to as a disaster recovery center. And so we made the agricultural center on Woodley Road at 1951 Woodley Road available to them so that they can be stationed in there. And that's an opportunity for the public that was impacted by the storm in whatever way they were impacted to meet face-to-face with FEMA and see about getting some help. There also will be other community organizations there offering help. So if there's any way that somebody's been affected and they want to reach out and talk to somebody about it, even all the way down to counseling, there's going to be opportunities for that. So I encourage people to go. It's from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. through October 23rd, and then they'll be back in November, I believe.
It's a very unique service. I've never heard of that before.
Well, we're appreciative that FEMA is actually able to do that in Lake County and be here for face-to-face meetings, and that'll be a tremendous benefit for a lot of people that were affected.
And again, where was that address?
So 1951 Woodley Road. It's on the corner of Woodley Road and State Road 19 in DeVaries.
Okay. If we can, let's shift gears and start talking a little bit about some economic development, some growth. What can we look forward to for Lake County?
So economic development is an area that's a priority of mine. It was something that I talked about with the county commissioners early on in my time as county manager, which I guess my entire time is early on right now because I've only been in the job a few months. But I know that it's a high priority for them, and I've been working very closely. Some of your listeners may know Robert Chandler, and Robert Chandler is now our executive director for the Agency for Economic Prosperity. And so we've kind of we're rebranding the group that Robert's responsible for, and essentially that encompasses groups now called Visit Lake and Elevate Lake, and then also our Fairgrounds and Expo. And the Visit Lake is our tourism component. The Elevate Lake is our economic development component. And so Robert and his staff are poised and ready to launch into taking our economic development and tourism opportunities to the next level. He creating the Agency for Economic Prosperity, and really that is it's not a new piece of government, but it's a kind of a retooled, rebranded piece of government. And so we're trying to provide Robert and his group an opportunity to have all the tools necessary that they need to go out and help businesses relocate to Lake County, help businesses that are already here stay here and grow, and then also address tourism and other opportunities to really elevate Lake County and promote our Real Florida, Real Close slogan.
We've had the privilege of having Robert on the show, and he's got all my confidence.
And mine.
He's sharp.
And mine. And I've worked with Robert for the couple of years that I've worked for the county, and certainly much more closely in my role as county manager. And Robert's from this area. Robert's from Leesburg, and he's got a real passion for economic development and tourism. He also has a real commitment to Lake County, and so those things combined will, I think, make his group very successful. And it certainly is worth noting that October is Manufacturing Month in Florida. And that is really an opportunity to promote and celebrate manufacturing. And so for some numbers in Lake County, we have 300 manufacturers in Lake County that employ about 8,000 people. And that's about 7% of the workforce in Lake County.
Wow. And
statewide, manufacturing is about 4% of the workforce. So we're doing real well here. We want to continue to see that grow, and we also want to continue to help the businesses that are already here.
That's pretty remarkable. We're 7%, and the state average is 4%.
Right, exactly. And I think
you
that's
really
a
wouldn't
testament.
think that about Lake County.
Well, it's a testament to this area, and also to the work that that the staff has done with the businesses. But certainly, we're trying to create a culture and an environment in Lake County that makes it attractive to businesses.
Absolutely. And it looks like it's paying off. So let me shift gears, if I may. There's been a lot of talk lately about the animal shelter, Lake County, who's taking it over, who's doing what with it, what we're looking at. Can you speak a little bit about our current status?
Absolutely. The animal shelter had been managed by the sheriff's office up until January. In the county, it came back to under the control of the county commission in January. And so then we have the county staff has worked to make it what's called a no-kill animal shelter. And what that means is that you really focus on ensuring that we're doing everything in our power to get animals adopted out, get animals placed, whether it be in foster care, whether it be adoption, whether it be returned to their original owners, that you're putting a whole lot of resources into that to reduce the amount of animals that have to be euthanized. And so we're very proud to say that we have reached those numbers to be no-kill status. And it's a real testament to the staff and the volunteers. We have a tremendous number of volunteers and animal welfare groups have worked closely with us, and we really appreciate the partnership that we've had with them, the partnership that we've had with the volunteers. People come in and give so much of their time to help and take care of the animals that are at the animal shelter, and that we could not do that without the groups and the volunteers and the people that are providing support. So right now, the shelter is undergoing a little bit of a renovation right now. We do believe that we're poised and ready to develop and build a new shelter in the next couple of years.
Oh.
So we're heading in that direction. I'll talk more about that. But right now, we're also doing some kind of interim improvements to the shelter just to make things nicer for the public, nicer for the animals, and that has meant some disruption. And so disruption is particularly difficult for the animals, but it's really difficult for the senior animals. And so I want to give a shout out to there are some senior dogs out there that really could use somebody coming in and fostering and or rescuing and or taking them home for their forever home.
By all means.
We have Magnolia, Marion, Ladybug, Suki, and Sheila. And those are all senior dogs, and they're having a little bit of an adjustment as we have to have all this construction going on around them. And if anybody wants to show up at 28123 County Road 561 in Tavares to take a look at any of those senior dogs, they would, I'm sure, appreciate a forever home.
Now, with all the different groups out there, and there are many, I got to admit, this is the first community I've been where it was so... There's so much energy behind.
A lot of passion in Lake County, which makes things very ripe for a really positive shelter experience for the public, for the animals, and it also makes it ripe for developing a new shelter and related fundraising that'll be happening with that. Hopefully next year. We're right now in the process of looking at potential architects for a design of a new shelter. So we're real early in the process.
So you're moving.
We're moving right along. We are moving forward. And when the voters in 2015 reauthorized the sales tax, and so that reauthorization starts in January of 2018. And with that, we've allocated funding for the design and build of a new animal shelter. All the funding isn't there, so we're going to need some help from the public and from community groups, but we've got a good start. And once we get a design in place, and once we do the work and the research and all that's related to that, then we'll be ready to move forward, share that design with the public, and look for our partnership funding and move forward and get those animals in a real nice environment.
That sounds great. And I know a lot of my listeners are chest pumping right now.
Well, those listeners right now can adopt Magnolia, Marion, Ladybug, Suki, and Sheila and save them from the construction that's going on around them. Senior dogs need places to spend their final days, and through no fault of their own, they're in an animal shelter, and it would be really great to place them.
Well, Jeff, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for coming on this show. I hope to have you back on sometime.
Thank you, Chris. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. That's it for our show today. This has been Radio Waves. I'm your host, Kris Poliquin, and we'll see you next time.